Every year during Sukkot, the festival of booths, people wonder, how exactly are we supposed to celebrate? Do we have to build a sukkah outside, on the roof, in a yard? What if you live in an apartment with no outdoor space? So the answer is in the text itself. And now I'm going to reveal to you what it says. And when we look closely, we see that yes, you could build your sukkah right inside where you live. In Leviticus chapter 23, verses 42 to 43, it says, "You shall live in booths 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths, in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I, the Lord your God." That is the command. Live in booths for 7 days to remember the Exodus. But notice what is not written. It doesn't say live outside. It doesn't say the booth has to be in a courtyard or under the open sky. It doesn't give measurements. It simply commands live in booths for 7 days. That leaves freedom in how we build, as long as it's a booth of branches. Let's look at Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 15 through 16. And this is the NJPS version. It says, "And that they should announce and proclaim throughout all their towns and in Jerusalem as follows: Go out to the mountains and bring leafy branches of olive trees, pine trees, myrtles, palms, and other leafy trees to make booths, as it is written." So the people went out and brought them and made themselves booths on their roofs, in their courtyards, in the courtyards of the house of God, and in the square of the water gate and the square of the Ephraim gate. This shows how the Israelites in that time chose to keep the command. They used the trees around them. They built booths on rooftops, in courtyards, and in public places. But this is their example, not a law. It is an observation, a practice, not an additional command. The command is still Leviticus chapter 23. Live in booths for 7 days. Let's look at a custom parallel, Jacob's struggle. So in Genesis chapter 32, verse 33, it says, "That is why the children of Israel to this day do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the socket of the hip, since Jacob's hip socket was wrenched at the thigh muscle." So here's the parallel. Just like Nehemiah records how Israel applied Sukkot, or the festival of booths, Genesis records how Israel added a custom about food. Now Leviticus 11 gives the actual command about clean and unclean animals. But Genesis chapter 32, verse 33 describes a practice that developed from the story of Jacob's wrestling. It is an observation of what the people did, not a divine command. So Jacob was wrestling, the text says, with God. So based on that legend, because Jacob had a busted hip after that, they won't eat the bottom half of the cow, which is below the sciatica of the cow. They only eat the upper part of the cow. So that is something that can be done, and there's nothing wrong with that, and basing it on legend, but it isn't a command, and it's not something that you have to do. So when we read Nehemiah, we see it the same way. Not a command about where to build, but an account of how Israel chose to apply Leviticus 23 in their day. So this is why an indoor sukkah works. If you live in an apartment or a place with no yard, you can still keep this command. The heart of the festival of booths, Sukkot, is not about being outdoors. That's not what this is just all about. It is about dwelling in a booth of branches for 7 days, remembering that Israel once lived in booths when brought out of Egypt. Now, does that mean that you have to be inside this booth for the whole 7 days? No. And here's why we know this. Because you're to take off 2 days, the first and the last day. And then the other days you could work. Well, you're not going to be able to go to work if you're just going to be dwelling in the booth. So this gives us another avenue of freedom for us to be able to do certain things during this festival. Now, you could build this any way that you want, as long as it's from wood and branches. So if you have a frame, if you have even a wooden wedding arch, and you cover it with pine or leafy branches or whatever branches are in your area, and you eat some meals and you spend days around it, then you are fulfilling the command by remembering that God took the Israelites out of Egypt. So when they were freed from slavery and they were out in the middle of the desert, they still had shelter. God provided that shelter. So this God is a God that frees people from slavery, and God enjoys giving people freedom from slavery. Amen to that. Now, it is no less valid indoors than it is on a roof. What matters is not the location, but the obedience to the command. Live in booths. So my celebration this year I've taken off work on the 1st and 7th days, just as Leviticus 23 commands, because they are sacred days of rest. And in my apartment, I'll be using a wooden wedding arch as the frame for my sukkah or my booth, wrapping it in branches and dwelling inside it for 7 days. That's how I will live out the command, not by chasing customs, but by obeying the word itself. So this festival of booths that we know called Sukkot, let's keep it simple. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 42 to 43. You shall live in booths 7 days, in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. That's the command. Whether your booth is indoors, outdoors, inside an apartment, or on your rooftop, the key is that it is built of branches and that you dwell for 7 days. This year, don't be bound just by a tradition, but let's focus on the source and get right back to what the word says and bring freedom in the way that you choose to celebrate this holiday.